What's up guys, today we are going to talk about Acheron, the newest 5-star Nihility DPS unit in Star Rail, and let me tell you, she is absolutely insane. She brings a breath of fresh air into the game because her ultimate is super unique and unlike anything we have seen so far in the game. I already talked about her briefly during the 2.1 livestream recap video, but in today's video we will go into more detail when it comes to everyone's favorite Galaxy Ranger. As such, let us talk about all the pros and cons regarding Acheron, light cones, relics, team composition, as well as my overall thoughts on her. There's a lot to talk about, so let us get started. So how does Acheron's kit actually work? At first glance you might be thinking that it does look somewhat complicated, as it does have a lot of buffs and debuffs and names and all of that stuff, but once you play her you will realize that she is fairly simple. Her kit is all about her ultimate. The way it works is that you will build up stacks on Acheron whenever you apply a debuff to your opponents. These debuffs can be anything: damage over time, weakness break, defense shreds, and even debuffs your opponents apply to themselves. And once you have gathered 9 stacks, Acheron will be able to use her ultimate. One thing to keep in mind here is that each debuff application only counts as 1 stack, so if you have a character that applies multiple debuffs at once, it still only counts as 1 stack for Acheron. Now once you have her ultimate, once you activate it, you will be able to attack your opponents, and you can even switch between your targets during the ultimate itself. You will also have a total of 3 attacks, with the last one doing the most damage. This is in a way the core essence of how Acheron works. You build up your ultimate in order to basically nuke your opponents, and then you repeat the process. But there's a lot of other stuff that comes into play when using Acheron. When it comes to her talent, Acheron will gain a 20% resistance shred during her ultimate, and she will also be able to break the weakness of any opponent regardless of their weakness type. This is absolutely insane, as it basically allows you to control the battlefield while still doing insane damage. On top of that, she will also apply 1 stack of Crimson Knot to any target that gets hit with a debuff outside of her ultimate. There are a few characters that apply debuffs to multiple opponents, like Pila with her ultimate for example, but if that is the case, you will only apply 1 stack of Crimson Knot to the enemy that already has the highest Crimson Knot stack count. If an enemy target goes down while having Crimson Knot, the remaining stacks will basically be transferred over to the enemy with the highest Crimson Knot count on the field. Now the question obviously is, what is Crimson Knot? What does it do? And for that we will have to take a look at her ultimate again, as well as one of her bonus traces. When it comes to her bonus trace, there's a lot of text, but effectively you will do bonus damage with your ultimate to any enemies who have Crimson Knot on them. That would be the easiest way of explaining this trace, and the same kinda applies to her ultimate. If you attack a target that has Crimson Knot on it, you will remove 3 stacks and do bonus damage for each stack removed. And once you use your last slash, you will remove all the remaining Crimson Knot stacks on the field. This allows you to do a little bit of min-maxing, as you want to attack enemies who have at least 3 stacks on them while using your ultimate. And you also, if you can, want to go into your ultimate while having at least 2 opponents on the field that have at least 3 stack counts on them. So a little bit of min-maxing here when it comes to her kit. Personally I like it a lot, and I hope you do too. After that we have her remaining abilities. Her normal attack is just that, a normal attack. It does some damage, but you kinda don't ever want to use it. Her skill attack does some decent damage to your main target as well as your adjacent targets, but more importantly it will give you 1 stack to your ultimate, while also applying 1 stack of Crimson Knot to your main target. Her second major trace will give you additional damage whenever you have up to 2 other Nihility characters in your party, and her third major trace will give you 5 stacks to your ultimate whenever you enter combat. On top of that, it will also give you a kind of fail-safe mechanic for your ultimate stacks. If you gather stacks for your ultimate while it is already fully charged, you will save those stacks for the next ultimate. But you can only do that up to 3 times, so make sure to use your ultimate eventually. One thing I want to point out here before we move on to her technique is that the damage bonus she gains from having other Nihility characters in her party is massive. If you have 2 other Nihility characters, you gain a 60% damage bonus for all of her abilities. This is insane, and it almost kind of forces her into going into a certain direction when it comes to team composition. Next up we have her technique, and this one is amazing. I know I kinda say that when it comes to every single technique in the game, but in this case I really mean it. First of all, when you use it on a smaller opponent, you will instantly end the battle. No fight needed, they are just not worthy of fighting Acheron. Secondly, you will gain 1 stack of, now bear with me, quadrivalent ascendants, I think is the way you pronounce it, for each new enemy wave, which is the name for the buff you get when applying a debuff to your opponents while your ultimate is already charged. There are a lot of specific names when it comes to Acheron's kit, and I did try to take most of them out, because in all fairness they are somewhat confusing, right? Besides that, you will also do 200% of Acheron's attack as damage to any new enemy wave, and you will also reduce their toughness regardless of their weakness type. Now, this is her entire kit, and like I said, there's a lot going on here. It might be confusing at first glance, and believe me, it was for me too, but once you play her a few times you will realize that she is actually fairly simple to play. Damage wise, she does keep up with the other characters in the game, if you play her correctly, and she also has a very high ceiling when it comes to gearing. She does need a good light cone in order to get going, but in the end she's definitely a character that will allow you to complete even the hardest content in the game. When it comes to your leveling priority, then you obviously go for her ultimate first, followed by her talent and her skill, and finally her basic attack. One thing I want to mention here, as we are currently talking about how strong Acheron is the fact that she does rely on her other teammates in order to truly shine. You need to apply debuffs to your opponents with your other characters, and as such you need effect hit rate on all your other characters. After all, if you miss your debuffs, you don't get any stacks for Acheron's ultimate. If you need a guide on how effect hit rate works, then you can check out one of my other videos for that. I talk about how it works, what it does, and what effect hit rate certain characters need in order to get going. I will leave a link to it somewhere on the screen right now or down in the description box. Like I mentioned before, another downside to Acheron is that she does need a good light cone in order to truly get going. Unfortunately, there are not a lot of free-to-play friendly options. As such, let us now move on to the gearing section of our guide. Alright, so this is post-editor Cozy, and originally I didn't plan on talking about her Eidolons in more detail. I briefly touched them during the end of the video in a small Q&A you guys might have, but now that I've been sleeping on it, I do have to admit that they are fairly impactful. They are the main reason as to why some people say that Acheron is not a free-to-play friendly character. So let us talk about her Eidolons, and while we are at it, we are also going to talk about the pull value of a light cone and the power gain she has between all of the different Eidolons. So first up, we have her first Eidolon, and this one is very simple. You get 18% crit rate whenever you attack an enemy that has a debuff on it, and that is kinda always the case, so this one is always active. After that we have Eidolon 2, which in my opinion is the most powerful Eidolon in her kit. Basically what it does is that it reduces the requirement for your passive trace from 2 nihility characters to only 1. So 60% damage increase by having just 1 nihility character in your party, and obviously because of that you open up your team composition. So when we talk about team composition later on, then keep that in mind. After that we have Eidolon 3 and 5, they kinda do the same as they always do. Obviously keep in mind Eidolon 3 is a +2 on your ultimate, so it's a big damage increase. And then we have Eidolon 4. This one is a 8% damage increase to your ultimate, as simple as that. And finally Eidolon 6. This one is insane. She simply goes berserk if you have this Eidolon. First of all, you increase the resistance penetration of your ultimate by additional 20%, and after that you also turn your basic attack and skill damage into ultimate damage. And because of that, you now are able to break the weakness type of your opponents by using your skill attack or your normal attack. And obviously, the last part of her Eidolon here, whenever you break an enemy's weakness, that is considered as a lightning weakness break, and as such you get another stack for your ultimate. So super powerful, and in a moment we are also going to talk about the power gain between her Eidolons as well as her signature light cone. So you will see that this one is, it's stupid. It's overpowered, as simple as that. So yeah, let us now move on to the power gain. Alright, so this graph is very simple, but keep in mind, right, a grain of salt here. Crit chance, crit damage, right, it's not super accurate because you don't always crit, right? But Basically what happens if you have her at Eidolon 0 and Superimposition 0, so basically without her signature light cone, she's at 100% of her power. After that we have her signature light cone, which will give you about a 15% damage increase when it comes to Acheron. If you get her first Eidolon, on top of the signature light cone, you have about 25% to 30% damage increase. Once again, crit rate, you don't always crit, so it's about in that ballpark. If you get her second Eidolon, it's a whopping 60% damage increase compared to, having no Eidolons at all. And if you have Eidolon 6 and Superimposition level 5, she's basically twice as good as your free-to-play option, which is insane. And if you're a super whale and you have Eidolon 6 and Superimposition level 5, you basically break the game. As simple as that. She is going berserk. Alright, so I hope this answers some of your questions. If you want to go for Eidolon, then keep in mind, in my opinion at least, Eidolon 2 over Eidolon 6 and Eidolon 4 over Eidolon 1. As simple as that. But more importantly, if you're free to play or a low budget spender, then just go for her signature light cone and skip her Eidolons altogether. But if you want to invest, then yeah, Eidolon 2, Eidolon 6, Eidolon 4, Eidolon 1. As simple as that. First up, let us take a look at all the 5-star light cones in the game and see how viable they truly are. The first and most logical option for Acheron obviously is her signature light cone. It is absolutely insane, gives you a ton of damage and is a must use if you have it. The next option is unironically Silverwolf's light cone. This one is really good for Acheron. The effect hit rate might be useless, but you do get crit rate and you also put a debuff onto your opponent whenever you use your skill attack. And obviously that is going to help with your ultimate regeneration. After that we have Kafka's light cone, which can be used, but in my opinion, if you have this light cone, you most likely have Kafka as well, so use it on her instead. The next one is Wel's light cone. And this one can be used, right? Your opponents always have a debuff on them, so you always make use of the passive effect, and you also always want to use her skill attack, so this light cone is a good option for Acheron. It might not be as good as the other light cones I mentioned so far, but if you have it, you can use it. The other two light cones, Reforged Remembrance and Solitary Healing, are not really recommended on Acheron because they don't really fit her kit. When it comes to our 4-star options, you need to keep in mind that most of the Nihility light cones are designed around applying debuffs, and as such a lot of them have effect hit rate on them, and you don't really want to have that on Acheron. So let me simply talk about the few light cones you can use on her. First up we have Good Night and Sleep Well. This one works perfectly. It increases the damage you do for every single debuff on your opponent, and especially at Superimposition level 5 it can keep up with most of the other 5-star light cones. After that we have We Will Meet Again, which I think comes from the Battle Pass, and it will allow you to do some extra damage after using your skill attack. The other options are in my opinion not that good on Acheron. You can use Fermata for example, but for that one keep in mind that you need to have a shock or wind shear debuff on your opponent in order to make use of the passive effect. Resolution Shines can also be used, but it is honestly speaking better used on a support character like Pila. As you can see, her light cone options are somewhat scuffed, I guess you could say, as you either need to pull for her 5-star light cone signature option or use Good Night and Sleep Well as your free-to-play option, quote-unquote free-to-play. So this is a big downside when it comes to Acheron, and personally I will try to get her signature light cone. When it comes to Relics, it gets very simple again. Her best in slot set is without a question the Pioneer set. It is tailor-made for Acheron, it is perfect. The 2-piece bonus gives you 12% increased damage against opponents who have a debuff on them, and the 4-piece bonus will give you crit rate and crit damage. And those effects will even be doubled if you apply a debuff to your opponents with Acheron herself. And you can do that by either using her signature light cone or, more easily, by using her ultimate. Because the 20% resistance shred on her ultimate counts as a debuff. So absolutely perfect for Acheron. If you don't have this set yet, then you can simply use any set that either increases your attack or your lightning damage. For example, the 4-piece lightning set, while you farm good pieces for the Pioneer set. You can also use the Quantum 4-piece set, but keep in mind that if you use Pila and Silverwolf in your team, you will most likely already hit the cap for defense shred, so this set loses in value. In summary, basically farm the Pioneer set. If you don't have it yet, then use a Band of Sizzling Thunder and you're good to go. Regarding planar ornaments, we get a new set called Izumo Blades of End and Beginning in patch 2.1. This set will give you 12% attack and 12% crit rate whenever you have another character in your party that follows the same path as Acheron. Due to her passive traits, we basically always have this active because we always want to use at least one other character that follows the path of nihility. If you don't have this set yet, which is likely as it is new, you can also use the Glamour set, Salsotto set or Space Healing Station set. All of them work perfectly fine, just keep in mind that you need to fulfill the passive requirements for them to work. Before we move on to our stats, there's one other set that I want to talk about, and that one is Sigonia the Unclaimed Desolation. It got introduced in patch 2.1 as well, and it is a really good option for Pure Fiction and the Memory of Chaos. This set can be used on any character that uses crit damage and crit rate, not just Acheron. It will give you 4% crit rate baseline and 4% crit damage for any target you defeat, stacking up to 40% crit damage in total, so it is a really good set for Acheron. Also, on a quick note, keep in mind that the Glamour set is still a strong option for Acheron, even if you only get to 135 speed. So if you have to decide between the new Ornament set and the new Relic set, then go ahead and farm the second one, as it will give you a bigger damage increase to your Acheron. When it comes to stats, Acheron follows the same principle as any other DPS character in the game. Crit rate and crit damage as your main stats, followed by attack and speed. There are certain speed thresholds you can hit, especially if you use the Glamour set, but make sure not to overinvest into speed because crit rate and crit damage are also essential for Acheron. Regarding the main stats, you can choose between attack or lightning damage on your planar Thria. Both are so close to each other that you should pay more attention to your substats. Your link rope is going to be attack, as simple as that. Your boot should be speed unless you're using a sparkle, in that case you can go attack. And your body is going to be crit rate or crit damage depending on what you need. As you can see, building her relics is fairly simple, as she follows the same principle as most of the other standard DPS characters you already might have. Just make sure that over time you try to get the Pioneer set and the new Ornament set from the simulated universe. Now let us move on to some possible team compositions. The very basic team composition for Acheron is always the same. We use Acheron as our main DPS and Pila as our first support character. You see Pila in literally every single team composition there is because she is perfect for Acheron. After that we put in Gallagher as our sustainer or Aventurin once he releases. If you don't have any of those two characters, you can also go for Fischwang, especially if you have her at Eidolon 1, or Locha, he also works. Höchre is not really recommended because you can't boost the energy of Acheron's ultimate with her own ultimate. After that we have the core composition for 90% of the Acheron teams out there. Pila, Gallagher and Acheron herself. The last slot is a flex slot and it can be filled by whatever character you have. You can use Silverwolf for a double nihility passive, you can use Bronja or Sparkle for a really good speed boost, or you can use Guinaifen or Black Swan for some good debuff application. And in the case of Black Swan you would even get your second nihility character, so a full passive trace. There are also some super sweaty teams out there that simply skip the sustainer altogether. In that case you use characters like Veld or Ruin Mei, but they are not really recommended for the average player as you need some cracked items on your characters. And finally there's one character that is a little bit special when it comes to team composition. That character is none other than Gepard. First of all, you would use him as a sustainer and you can use the Trend Lightcone on him, and whenever he gets attacked he will put a debuff on your opponent, which counts as one stack for Acheron's ultimate, so a really good option as well. And with that we are done with the team composition, so let us now move on to our last section, a short Q&A for some questions you might have, as well as my own opinion regarding Acheron. And while we are at it, you can also watch some footage of an E6 Acheron taking care of the Memory of Chaos. Alright, so let me try to answer some of your questions when it comes to Acheron. First up, is there a big difference between the Izumo and Salsotto sets? And the answer is not really. Choose your own set based on your substats, they are fairly close to each other, so if you already have a good Salsotto set, then skip the Izumo set for your Pioneer set. After that we have a question regarding her light cones. How good is Good Night and Sleep Well compared to the other 4-star options? Well, it is by far your best in slot option besides her signature Lightcone. It is even better than most of the other 5-star Lightcones, especially at super position level 5. only Silverwool's Lightcone keeps up with it because it gives you crit rate as well as a debuff, which is going to help you when it comes to your ultimate regeneration. After that, we have a question regarding her Crimson Knot mechanic. Does it count as a debuff for your Pioneer set? And unfortunately it doesn't. But like I said earlier, the 20% resistance shred on your ultimate does count, so basically the Pioneer set is always active whenever you want it to be active. Next up we have the simple question of whether you can 2-turn ultimate on Acheron. And yes, you can. It depends on your team composition, but yes, you can. Next up we have, do you have numbers showing the differences between the light cones, relics and so on? And well, technically I don't, but someone else has them. I will leave a link to a very detailed guide including numbers and everything else down in the description box for you guys to read. Huge thanks to the Acheron main subreddit for that one. It was a really big help when it comes to creating this guide. And lastly, you didn't talk about Eidolons. What's going on here? Well, I didn't talk about them because I will talk about them now. I will not talk about the abilities themselves, as you can read that for yourself, but what Eidolon priority do we have on Acheron? Well, super simple, Eidolon 2 over Eidolon 6, followed by Eidolon 4 and Eidolon 1. And with that we are at the end of the guide. Personally, I'm super happy when it comes to Acheron, but I also have to say that she does have some weaknesses, like no good free-to-play friendly options for her lightcones. On top of that, she does have a very high ceiling when it comes to her relics, and that can put some people off. I for once like having the ability to truly min-max a character, but I can also understand if people don't like that. When it comes to the character herself, her animations, her lore and all of that stuff, I think that everyone would agree that she is just amazing. I'm always surprised about what miHoYo can do when it comes to new characters, and I can't wait to see what else they have in store for us in the future. Besides that, if the guide was helpful, then leave a like, a comment and a sub. It is highly appreciated, and as always, have a great day or night wherever you live, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.